Hello, everybody, and welcome to the season finale of Playbook. Man, it has been a long, strange season, but we have rolled with the punches, the postponements, and cancellations, and finally arrive at the ACC championship, along with a final regular season game. Hey, it's 2020. Couldn't leave, without one last weird little memory, right? But we're going to dig in here. This is the one that we've all been waiting for. Number 3, Clemson, and number 2, Notre Dame, squaring off of that ACC title. Kickoff in Charlotte Saturday at 4 o'clock. Now, that Clemson football defense, man, they got a tough task ahead of itself as the Tigers look to slow down an offense that put up 47 points on them the last time they matched up with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Now, it wasn't that long ago that we saw Clemson and Notre Dame match up on the field. I mean, the Tigers traveled to South Bend without the services of linebacker James Skalski, Mike Jones Jr., and defensive tackle Tyler Davis. Notre Dame's offense took full advantage of that depleted lineup, and the defense was clearly gassed before the night ended. It went to the limit, but Clemson came up on the short end of the stick. So what did they take from it is the question.
Hopefully we'll learn from that. So that's where it starts. I mean, we got to do a better job, like I said, in the trenches. We got to do a much better job of containing this quarterback. He's a great player. He's going to make plays, but we've got to do a better job than we did in the first game. We got to fit the run better. We missed some tackles, and then we got to make some of the competitive plays because they're going to push the ball down the field. That's just what they do. I mean, the ball's going downfield, and you can't sit back and play a bunch of zone coverage on these guys. They're going to run the ball right at you. You're going to have some one-on-one matchups, and we've got to do a better job of winning some of those plays.
I'll say it every time. Those Zoom backgrounds still look like everybody is a Force ghost. All you Star Wars fans, what I'm talking about out there. Moving on, while Dabo has the top-flight quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, man, he can't help but give kudos to the guy suiting up for the Irish. Ian Book is no slouch. Great ability out and out of the pocket, in and out of the pocket. And when pressed for a comparison, Dabo took it a few years back, comparing Book to legendary Notre Dame quarterback Joe Montana. That's when he certainly hopes Book does not play like Joe Montana on Saturday in the ACC title game, but he acknowledges that Book is crafty.
And he really knows how to, scramble. And sometimes he's scrambling to go run for it, and then other times he's scrambling to open guys up because they are as good at the scramble drill as anybody you're going to play. I mean, they do an unbelievable job, but just incredibly impressed with him. I mean, he like I said, his toughness, his accuracy, his ability to push the ball down the field, but his ability to extend plays. I mean, he makes so many plays off schedule, and he does it routinely. I mean, it's just, you got guys there, he'll make a miss. He's a problem.
And much like Michael Jordan in The Last Dance, you pick on the ACC, Dabo's going to take it personally. Again, he went to bat for the conference amid speculation that they were protecting its top 2 teams to secure spots for the college football playoff. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey was the one who took issue with the conference for failing to fill games in Clemson and Notre Dame's open dates ahead of the ACC title game, saying that his conference mostly played all of its scheduled games. Sankey added, playing games matters. The playoff selection committee has said that we have a chance to demonstrate the excellent football in the Southeastern Conference. Today, I really didn't have any pushbacks from our teams. They're ready to play, and these opportunities, I think playing games matters. Here's what Dabo said.
If the ACC was trying to really protect Clemson and Notre Dame, why would we even play the game this week? I mean, if 6 wins can get you in the playoffs, shouldn't 9 get you there? Shouldn't 10 get you there? I mean, so if the ACC was really trying to protect Clemson Notre Dame, we wouldn't even play this game. And that's not what we're about. We want to crown a worthy champion. It's going to be an awesome game.
Want the best information? You go right to the source. So right now, let's go to the man who covers the Clemson Tigers for us. Of course, I'm talking about Pete Yannity of WSPA-TV. Pete, thanks for taking the time. Let's get right into this thing here, man. The first time the Tigers played Notre Dame, I mean, they took them to the limit without Trevor Lawrence. Now, the question is he the nudge they're going to need to take home the win this time, in your opinion?
Short answer, yes. Long answer, the fact that he will add so much to the offense, and you say that, and keep in mind his backup, DJ Uiagalelei, threw for a record against Notre Dame in their history, nearly 440 yards, but they just weren't balanced in that game. They averaged a yard per carry in the run game. And Trevor Lawrence, especially in the postseason last year and since he returned to action for the final couple of regular season games, has the ability to keep an opposing defense off balance because he can run it. He read options as well as anyone in the country. They kind of rolled that package out for the Virginia Tech win back in their last game of the regular season. I think he is a huge difference. I think Vegas recognizes that, and that's why they've installed Clemson is better than a touchdown favorite.
Now, the last time out, Travis Etienne, I mean, there's no other way to say it. I mean, he was shut down, and obviously they need him. I mean, what are they talking about doing differently this time around to get him going sooner and to make him a more productive, if you will, because he was almost stopped cold.
Yeah, my question to Dabo Swinney this week was, you say you need to have a better running game. Does that mean you make different calls up front with how you try to block? A really good and physical front seven for Notre Dame, or what happens there? And he says we just got to play better up front block-wise, and then the added part of that was Trevor being back should help. But Etienne, it's really interesting. He's not had a great season as a running back statistically, and I say that in a year where he still has good numbers. He's established a new ACC career rushing record. He's in the neighborhood of 800 yards. He may still end up with 1,000 yards this year if they play a couple of more games after this one, and he's got a really good chance if they can play all the way to the championship game to go over 5,000 in his career. But that night, keep in mind, he put a ball on the ground on just one of those, miscues, physical error that can happen to anybody, and that led to a scoop and score. And he never had the holes to run, and you could tell when you got a quarterback who throws for over 400 yards, that means that the defense is setting up to deny something, and in that case, they were trying to stop the run. But I think for Etienne, having Lawrence there for the read option to put it on his chest for a second or two, and you don't know, and you got to freeze if you're the outside linebacker or defensive end trying to read that play, I think that'll be a big difference for him. But he seems to be healthy now. He's had a few weeks to recover from a little bit of a knee issue that he suffered at the end of the Notre Dame game. He kept on playing. I think rest and having his quarterback back are the two biggest things for him in this game.
I think it speaks volumes that he's having a bad season by his standards. But by anybody else, it would be amazing. They'd love to have it now.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about getting Lawrence back, but the Tigers, they also get some help back on defense with Skalski, Mike Jones Jr., and defensive tackle Tyler Davis, all going to be able to play this time as well, right?
You could argue that the most important of those three coming back, and yes, they will all be in the lineup, is Tyler Davis because he's so disruptive in the middle. And on a show we do here, I had a beat writer on this week, and he made a great point. There's a guy in the middle of the defensive line for the Atlanta Falcons named Grady Jarrett, and he was the same kind of middle of the defensive line, nose tackle, nose guard, call him what you wish, that Tyler Davis is now for Clemson. Athletic, not overly the big, impressive, 300-pound frame like Dexter Lawrence, who's now with the Giants, was prior to Davis getting that job a couple of years ago for Clemson. But he's athletic enough that he can be a run stuffer, but also can do some things in the middle of the defensive front. They just don't have anyone else on their roster that can do that. And you saw what Ian Book was able to do to Clemson in the last game, extending plays, and Tyler Davis adds a component that could really get in the way of that. But having James Skalski, who's the quarterback on defense, and Mike Jones back healthy at linebacker is a huge difference, especially because Jake Venables, who was Skalski's backup, is out for the season with a broken arm. So that would have been something that would have been an issue. They've got some depth there, but it helps having the experienced guys, to say the least.
You mentioned Ian Book there, and I wanted to ask you about him. He really had a great night against Clemson the last time out. Do they have an answer for him this time around? I mean, he's been progressing every single week. Do they have his number this time, or is he going to be a bigger problem now as he was before in November?
I think they've obviously give Brent Venables the rare chance to play a team for a second time in a season, or second time within a year, and you'll see that they'll do some things differently. They'll probably spy him. I could see where you'd probably see, I wouldn't be stunned if you see Skalski, Jones on the field along with Balin Spector all at the same time, maybe try to go with 4 defensive backs, take the chance on the 2 wide receivers that Notre Dame tends to throw to the most in man coverage. They also use their running back coming out of the backfield a little bit. But I think this is a game where you can probably get away with 3 linebackers. Venables usually likes to play 2 and then a hybrid guy. because Notre Dame's 4th in the country in passes completed to their tight ends. Their top 2 tight ends have nearly 50 catches. So you feel better with a linebacker usually covering a tight end. So I think they would feel confident in that. And Balin Spector is kind of that guy who he's more of a linebacker than he is the hybrid guy. But and Jones is also in that realm. But I think that you'll see them pay a lot more attention when Book drops back to pass as to what he does if he doesn't throw the football. I think that'll be a real key in the game if you see those 3 guys on the field at the same time. That's my guess, but I just suppose that's the direction they're going to go.
I'll go with your guesses over some other people's facts that I've heard about this one. Now, Dabo said, this is just another game. We've heard that before. The next game, no revenge factor. Do you believe him at all there, Pete?
He is 17-8 in revenge games during his career as a head coach. So he's trying to go 10 games over 500. Be just the 3rd time in Clemson history, and interestingly, the 3rd time under Dabo that they have an in-season opportunity to play a team twice. And of the 2 prior, one of those was a revenge game. They lost against Georgia Tech in the 2009 season, lost to them in the regular season, lost in the ACC title game in a close ball game that no one punted in, by the way, which is the only game I'd ever called while I was calling Clemson games that I ever saw that. And then Virginia Tech in 11, they beat them in the regular season in what I still think is one of the really underrated wins in the early portion of Dabo Swinney's career, because that was a credibility win. Then they beat him again in the ACC title game. So this is a second opportunity under Dabo that in season they've had a revenge chance. But they've always been good at coming back and beating a team the next time around. He motivates in a lot of different ways, and even though publicly he said all we focus on is what's straight ahead, I would think somehow, some way, either through telegenics or through some type of algorithm or whatever else they use, subconscious, maybe calling the South Carolina and North Carolina DOT tomorrow when the buses are driving up there, and instead of the screen above the highway saying I-40 is closed at mile marker, whatever, it might say, you know, Notre Dame 47, Clemson 40 double overtime. Who knows?
I wouldn't put it past him there. I heard that soundbite, and I couldn't help but get up from that Zoom call I was watching. My leg was hurting, and I felt like it's because somebody was underneath there pulling on it. It was Coach Swinney, because I don't believe it for a second. I'm sorry. Pete Yannity, everybody, yeah. Thank you for hanging out with us. I appreciate it.
All right, my friend, thanks.
And for the first time in program history, Notre Dame football playing for a conference championship. Think about that for a second. And now the Fighting Irish are eager for the opportunity to dethrone Dabo Swinney's Clemson Tigers, who have won the last, get this, 5 straight ACC titles. Needless to say, Fighting Irish head coach Brian Kelly is hyped about the chance to deliver an ACC championship and, without a doubt, earn a bid in the college football playoffs for the 2nd time. Kelly expects to see another heavyweight championship bout that will be highly contested. Now, he downplayed the notion that winning the first game between the 2 teams is either an advantage or disadvantage when it comes to the highly anticipated rematch.
It depends on what happens the first time around. This was a double overtime game. You know, both teams believe that they could have won the football game. Certainly we did. I'm sure Clemson believes they could have won the game. So from that perspective, I think, you know, both teams leave with, you know, feeling of confidence. And look, Clemson's not a team that needs confidence. You know, they've been the king of the ACC for a number of years.
Force Ghost Brian Kelly is right. They have been the king for a number of years, and the rematch with Clemson is going to see Trevor Lawrence take the field for the first time against Notre Dame. And what the Tigers fans will hope to be a rejuvenated Travis Etienne. Yeah, the 2-time ACC Player of the Year was held to just 28 yards rushing and 85 total yards against that defense last time. Brian Kelly expects to see a motivated Etienne on Saturday, and he outlined what the Irish must do in order to stop him once more.
You know, when you put your game plan together, you know, the first thing you got to think of is how you're going to slow him down. So tremendous respect for him. You know, we're going to have to get him on the ground and make sure that he doesn't get out in the second level. If he gets out in the second level, he's a problem. So you got to get him before he gets started, and that means control in the line of scrimmage.
All right, to get the other side of what's shaping up to be an epic game in Charlotte this weekend is the man covering the Notre Dame Fighting Irish for us. Of course, I'm talking about WTTV's Chris Woodley. Thanks for taking the time here, Chris. Getting right to it. Coach Kelly talked about this game a little differently today, comparing it to playing your brother in the driveway. I thought that was interesting. He said talent about even, going to come down to the will of the opponent. Do you think he's on to something with this year? And does Notre Dame have the will is a better question.
I think they have the will. I do. Who's going to be the big brother, though? You know, it'll be very interesting to see how it all unfolds. But you wonder who has the advantage after that first game. I mean, you don't want to play a team a second time in the same season. That's tough, especially if you beat them the first time. And Coach Kelly was asked that earlier, and he said, well, I think it depends. He goes, we got a lot of confidence in knowing that we could beat Clemson and beat one of the nationally ranked teams and one of the best teams in the nation. So that helped us. Yet Clemson's going to want to come out for some revenge. But, yeah, the talent level is probably even on both sides. The skill level is great. The speed is there for both sides. Again, it's the big playmakers who's going to step up. I know Notre Dame didn't see Trevor Lawrence in the first matchup, but it wasn't the quarterback issue in that first game. His backup threw for, what, over 400 yards in South Bend? So that wasn't the problem. The game was one of the trenches, and I think if Notre Dame again can hold Travis Etienne down, they've got a real chance to win this game.
Yeah, he did make mention of him. It's crazy. It wasn't that long ago these two squared off. It just seems like forever due to COVID and lockdowns and all that. But tell me, what did Notre Dame pick up from that victory that they can maybe take to this game with Clemson? I mean, even though the Tigers now bring more on defense and, of course, like we said, Trevor Lawrence.
Well, certainly the confidence level, as I mentioned before, that they can go toe-to-toe with the best and beat the best. That was huge. Ian Book has had a great career. He hasn't always won the very big games, and he hasn't always been able to carry a team on his back. I think he was able to do that and make almost all the big plays. He had that one fumble that nearly cost Notre Dame, but excuse me, he came back and was able to do what he needed to do to win. So confidence was number one, and two, winning the game of the trenches. Notre Dame wants to be able to dictate what their opponent does. So if they can get him into a third and long down and distance, much like they did in the first matchup, they feel like they can win this game. So Ian Book's got the confidence to beat a big team, a nationally ranked team, and winning the game of the trenches. And they were able to do that the first time. If they can do that again, this time in the ACC Championship, they got a real opportunity.
Yeah, you're tracking right along here, talking about that quarterback here is Ian Book. Phenomenal all year. How impressed are you with the way that he's grown and progressed from week one to where they are now? Because it's not night and day, but it's not far from it from where I'm sitting. What do you think?
You're right. He has gotten better and better and better, and the guy is just a playmaker. I mean, you look at him, you look at his size, you look at his speed, you're like, well, he doesn't look like a top-tier quarterback in college football. And it's interesting, a few weeks ago, I think a USA Today writer came out and listed all the top quarterbacks in college football. I think there were probably 10 of them. Ian Book was not one of them. And Brian Kelly came out in the news conference saying, I don't know what this guy is watching, but I'll tell you what, Ian Book is using that as fuel. And Ian came up and said the very same thing. He goes, I'm doing my best. I'm surprised that maybe I'm not among the elite, but this just adds fuel to the fire. And I think he is one of those guys that plays better with a chip on his shoulder. And he's got the tight ends to work with. He's got a good running game. The wide receiver group is a little questionable. They've disappeared for some games, and they've come up big in a few others, but he needs a wide receiver group to do well. But Book has used that chip on his shoulder to really fuel himself and get better and better and better. And that guy is, he goes by the book. He studies harder than almost any quarterback I think that's out there. He knows he has to work harder. He probably doesn't have the physical tools that a guy like Trevor Lawrence has or Justin Fields at Ohio State. He's got to work harder. He's got to win the mental game, and so far that's really working for him, especially this year.
I think I heard somebody say that he's just a game manager, and I'm trying to figure out where that became a bad thing. Seriously. I mean, if you're managing the game, especially when you're winning games like that, I mean, am I wrong in assuming that's a bad thing here?
It's not a bad thing, especially when you become the winningest quarterback in Notre Dame football history. Think about that. All the great quarterbacks that have gone through there. I think Brady Quinn and Joe Montana were right there at the top of that list. Ron Powlus was there. Some guys have done well at the college level, maybe not in the NFL, but he is the winningest quarterback in Notre Dame history, which is absolutely remarkable. So he's got to be doing something right.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Winning all those football games. It's not just the defense.
No.
He's been able to do what he has to do to win these football games, and he's doing it.
He's putting some points up on the board. I even go back a little further than that. Redskins fan. There's some guy named Theismann. We'll talk about that later. But,
oh, you bet.
No big deal. X Factor time here. What do you think is going to the game's going to hinge on here? What do the Irish need to do to win an ACC championship? That's their first. That'd be their first conference championship too, right?
First conference championship, first year in a conference. How about that?
Not bad.
I think the defense has to do better against the pass. Again, they gave up over 400 yards in their first matchup. They did a great job on Etienne. They completely shut him down, but they've got to do better defensively against the pass. I think they also have to start strong. I think they have to play well in the first quarter and keep that game close. I'm surprised the odds makers have this game as a double-digit contest. I think this is going to be a one-possession game at the end, and if they get it down into the fourth quarter, I think they've got a real opportunity. And putting it in the hands of Kyron Williams, who'd had a great game the first game against the Tigers, and maybe Ian Book and his tight ends. If he uses his tight ends well against the Clemson Tigers, I think they've got a real opportunity. But I think regardless of what happens in this game, we're going to have an ACC champion. I think both make the college football playoff no matter what happens.
I get the odd feeling you might be, you're right. I get the odd feeling you're right about that one. Not might be. I'm going to go ahead and call it right now. I think they're both in there. Covering Notre Dame, it's Chris Whitlock. Thanks for hanging out, man.
You got it.
One big weekend of ACC football left to go, and who has the edge? I mean, who do you talk to? Who do you take? That's why we bring on Jason Logan from Covers.com to make sense of it all. And Jason, thank you for joining us again. And you kind of touched on the ACC championship opening odds last week. Where has the spread and the total for Clemson and Notre Dame moved since then?
Yeah, this one opened Clemson -7.5, and we've actually seen it climb a full field goal, sitting at Clemson -10.5 at most books right now, according to our Covers consensus. We are seeing 60% of the bets on Notre Dame, however, so a lot of people like the extra points with the Irish. Notre Dame, of course, scored that win over that COVID-depleted Clemson squad back in Week 10, with the Tigers not only missing star QB Trevor Lawrence, but a bunch of key defensive standouts as well, too. Since then, Clemson has kind of been on a bit of a rampage. They've gotten healthy their last two games. And the Irish also look pretty strong here in the last three games since Week 10. But now they're going to get that full power effort from Brent Venables' defense, which has something to prove, I think, after allowing 47 points to Notre Dame in that OT affair back in Week 10. The total for this matchup is at 60 points, which makes sense considering the two quarterbacks that you're playing here. But I believe that this game is going to be a showcase for the Clemson defense. If we look at how the Tigers have tightened their belts in postseason play, so before running into that historic LSU offense there last year in the CFP title game, they were pretty good. Clemson has allowed a total of just 96 points in the previous 7 postseason games. That's an average of less than 2 touchdowns per contest. So while I may not be buying into the point spread here, I do like the under 60.
Yeah, this finale is going to go a long way in deciding the Final Four in the college football playoff. Where are the Tigers and Irish in the odds to win the national championship?
Yeah, so Clemson, who came up 4th in that CFP standings, the recently released CFP standings, they're at plus 250. That's the second overall favorite to win the national title behind Alabama, which is minus 130. Of course, should Clemson lose the ACC title game, you're likely to see like an SEC school of Florida or Texas A&M or even Iowa State out of the Big 12 to slide in and get consideration. The Irish are the 4th choice at plus 800 behind Alabama, behind Clemson, and behind Ohio State, which is plus 500 to win the CFP championship. Given the current rankings, we could see a third game between Clemson and Notre Dame, which could kind of possibly be a rubber match if Clemson wins this one. However, if Clemson does win the ACC, a victory over the number 2 ranked team in Notre Dame, there's no way you can't slide them to the 2nd spot, and then maybe you're moving Ohio State up and then tucking in the Irish at number 4. A Clemson blowout over Notre Dame could kind of discount that Week 10 win, and it might sneak one of those other teams into the mix. The Gators kind of had their title hopes a bit dashed against LSU last week, and then they have to play Alabama again this week. I think Texas A&M might be a sneaky kind of wild card here to get in because they play Tennessee, and their only loss is to number 1 Alabama. But as of right now, it looks like, according to the odds makers, 2 ACC schools are going to get into that CFP Final Four.
And the only other game running this weekend In the ACC, Wake Forest hosting Florida State. What do the odds makers have lined up for this matchup?
Yeah, this is why we have sports betting, right? To make these kind of games interesting. So books open Wake as a touchdown favorite at home, but that's slim to -6.5, and that's despite only 37% of the bets right now sitting on FSU. The wheels have kind of come off Wake Forest here the past two games, allowing a grand total of 104 points in those losses to Louisville and UNC. Florida State, on the other hand, pounded Duke 56-35 last time out. And with so many ACC programs passing on bowl games, the Noles may actually have a chance to get an invite here. So maybe that's, playing into their motivation, and that's despite finishing with a losing record. Quarterback Jordan Travis, he returned against the Blue Devils after missing the NC State game the game before. He posted a pretty good stat line, 192 yards passing, 2 TDs along with 90 yards on the ground, and a rushing touchdown. The offensive line looked really good for the Noles. Florida State could also have some of Travis's top targets back in that receiving court, guys that missed the last few games. And we're always wary against betting the Noles ATS, but I think this is another one here. I think it could creep over that total, which is pretty high, 66 points right now.
Crunching the numbers so we don't have to. He's Jason Logan at Covers.com. Thanks a lot. Well, like we said on the same day that ACC championship game is going on in Charlotte and Winston-Salem, the conference's regular season is going to wrap up as well. Florida State and Wake Forest squaring off, looking to end their year on a high note and maybe, like you said, play in one more game in a bowl game. And for a look at the Seminoles, let's head to Tallahassee and talk with WMVB's Courtney Mims. Courtney?
The roller coaster ride of Florida State's 2020 football season is almost to an end. They played their last home game of the year last week against Duke, and they're getting ready to head to North Carolina this weekend for a matchup against Wake Forest.
The Seminoles coming into this one after snapping a 3-game losing streak with a big 56-35 victory over the Blue Devils. Quarterback Jordan Travis was triumphant in the win, too. Not only was the offensive line able to protect him for most of the game, but he passed for 192 yards and 2 touchdowns, and also rushed for 90 yards on 12 carries. And the rest of the offense stepped up as well. The Seminoles rushing for 324 yards and 6 touchdowns in the win. Head coach Mike Norvell said he hopes that the team's success last week will carry over into this Saturday's game.
Always want to make sure that even with success, you learn from the experiences that you had, and you continue to get better. You always want to continue to have that edge, and the focus is that 1% growth. The focus is going out there and being the best version of yourself, because there was a lot of things that we took from that game in areas that we've got to get corrected. We've got to improve.
This game may not be the last of the year for the Noles because they could be invited to a bowl game due to the NCAA waiving bowl eligibility requirements this year because of the pandemic. However, Norvell isn't focusing on that right now, just their upcoming game against Wake Forest.
Reporting on Florida State, I'm Courtney Mims.
Thank you, Courtney. Meanwhile, the Demon Deacons head into the final regular season game sitting at 4-4. And with so many teams opting out, I mean, it might not be out of the realm of possibility. 5-4 mark, definitely get them an invite somewhere, you would think, right? I mean, come on now. But first, they got to stop an FSU team that can straight up roll up some points. Silver lining for the Deacons this year has been their offense, which ranks 4th in the ACC with 37 points per game. For more on the Deeks, let's go to WGHP's Danny Harden. Danny.
Coming into this 2020 season, one of the big goals for the Wake Forest football team, go to a bowl game. The Deacons had gone to a school record 4 straight bowls, and a 5th in a row would be special. COVID sure messed things up at times. In fact, this past Saturday, Wake played its first game in a month because of COVID. The Deacons looked rusty and lost to Louisville. But this Saturday, Wake Forest, with a 4-4 record, has one more regular season game at home against Florida State. One thing that's definitely on Wake's Christmas list, an invitation to that bowl game.
I mean, I've been a part of 4 straight bowl games. I've been here since the beginning of 2016. I know how important that is for this program to keep going to bowl games and keep winning championships. And I mean, we got this far into a season like this, so we may as well finish strong. And I mean, I think that's all of our goals, is to come out bowl champions.
First, we got to play Florida State, and obviously that's what everybody's mind's on. But we obviously want to be able to beat Florida State and go into a bowl game and finish with a winning record. I feel like that's what everyone wants. I feel like team morale's getting higher and higher, and I personally want to go to a bowl, and I want to finish with a winning record.
Definitely think it's a big accomplishment. Like we've been all talking about, going through
COVID and not playing games and not being able to hang out with each other and, you know, just the weirdness of the 2020 season. I think it would be a great way to end the season, you know, especially for the seniors. It'd be our last season, and going out in a bowl game, you know, that'd be really awesome.
It's still a guessing game right now, but if Wake Forest can beat Florida State, ESPN has them projected for the ServPro First Responder Bowl in Dallas the day after Christmas. Reporting on the Deacons, I'm Danny Harnden.
All right, keep laughing, but it's a bowl game, and anybody would go. Let me trust me, you definitely stop it. You guys would go, I know for sure. You're going to be able to catch the Demon Deacons and the Noles before you sit down for that ACC championship game kickoff in Winston-Salem Saturday at noon. Now, we've talked a lot about how little separation there is between the top two teams in the ACC tonight, but there's clearly a number 3, and UNC just went all the way down to South Florida and blew out Miami, who was in the top 10 until this week. And as WNCN's Alyssa Ray reports, it was thanks in part to some history from the Tar Heels' two-headed rushing attack. Alyssa?
To say North Carolina ended its regular season on a high note would be an understatement. The Tar Heels went to Miami as underdogs, and after a 62-26 win over the number 10 team in the country, Carolina got the statement win they've been wanting just in time for bowl selection.
The two-headed monster in the Heels' backfield proved to be just that, a monster. Michael Carter and Javonte Williams combined for 544 yards rushing, setting the record for highest two-player total in FBS history.
I'll try to do it again, but at the end of the day, we just, you know, this is a moment that we're in right now. So I don't want to get too far ahead, but I'm learning from the last time I went on stage and said we were the best. So we're just in a moment right now. We had a good moment, you know, something that nobody's ever did before. It's a blessing, and we'll just see what happens next.
It feels great, just being able to see success from somebody that I worked so hard with. Took me under his wing when I first got here. Just showed me the way. It's really a blessing.
With the win, UNC jumped Miami, and the Heels become the third best ACC team in the college football playoff rankings. Clemson and Notre Dame meet in the conference championship game, and there are some scenarios that would send both the Tigers and the Fighting Irish to the playoffs. If that's the case, the next best ACC team, UNC, would get a bid to the Orange Bowl.
It makes a statement that we're a confident team that wasn't scared to go on the road against a team that's already won 10 games and with the Orange Bowl on the line.
The final college football playoff rankings are announced Sunday, but the Heels should know where they stand as far as the Orange Bowl after the ACC title game. Chris?
Thank you, Alyssa. And before we go, let's just take one last look at when this one starts, because you're not going to want to miss a minute. Clemson looks for a little revenge against number 2 Notre Dame in this year's ACC championship game. Kickoff Saturday. That's Saturday at 4 o'clock. And I just want to say thanks for joining us all season on Playbook. I honestly never thought that we would get this far with everything going on, but here we are. Enjoy the ACC championship game Saturday, and then come on back after the holidays. We're going to be here with another season of Chase for the Championship, where we're going to dive into ACC basketball. Man, I cannot wait. That's all coming in the new year. Until then, get out there and enjoy some football, everybody.